you, Lakshmi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm Puneet. I'm responsible for marketing and fintech engagements for Finacle globally. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this session. I hope the year 2021 has started on a great note for you, your family, and your organization. I wish you a very healthy and successful year ahead. Today, we have a great opportunity to learn from executives from three leading banks who have joined us to discuss a very contemporary topic of scaling digital innovation in business and corporate banking. We have with us Michael Spiegel, Global Head of Transaction Banking at Standard Chartered, Mr. Kashinath Hariharan, popularly known as Kashi, who heads payments, cash management, and transaction banking at ICICI Bank, Mr. Zaid Zalali, Head of Structured Finance and Transaction Banking at National Bank of Bahrain. Thank you so much, Michael, Kashi, and Zaid, for joining us at Finacle Conclave. Coming to the topic at hand, it's an extremely apt time to discuss about digital innovation in business and corporate banking. Earlier in the conference, we heard from several speakers about how the pace of change and digital disruption has been accelerating over the last many years, and how COVID-19 has further accelerated the need for digital innovation. In fact, with COVID-19 induced economic turmoil, business and corporate banking has been impacted even more than the retail banking. Economic challenges have directly dented the business prospects. Shrinking GDP has moderated corporate investments and thus the opportunities financial institutions have. All of this comes along with low and in many places even negative interest rates. And amongst all this, the incumbent financial institutions have to also deal with new competitors who are leveraging modern technologies like cloud, APIs, AI, blockchain to disrupt the market with innovative products, better customer experience, and very attractive pricing. In these very dynamic times, it's really a privilege for me to host and learn from industry leaders like Michael, Kashi, and Zaid. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining the panel today. To begin, I would like to request you all to give our global audience a brief context of your organization, the business segments you're focusing on, and the key approaches you have undertaken to scale digital innovation in your respective organizations. Michael, shall we start with you?
Yeah, thank you very much. With pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. Very happy to be here. So Standard Chartered is, as probably most of you know, is an international banking group. We have a presence in over 60, probably of the world's most dynamic markets. We offer banking services to individuals, to our consumer and private banking business, as well as to business banking clients in business banking, and to companies and financial institutions, to corporate, commercial, and institutional banking. Embracing digitization and partnerships to reinforce our competitive advantage, continues to be a strategic priority for the group. And specific to my role, specific to transaction banking, we've continuously been pushing both our own innovation and solution development, as well as collaborating and partnering with new and existing technology companies to innovate, whether it's cross-border payments, trade finance space. Right, if you allow me, I'll give you some examples. So for instance, Contour, right, where we're a founding member for letters of credit supported by blockchain technology. Linklogis, where we work with on deep tier supply chain financing, and Financial, with whom we have collaborated both in cross-border payment space as well as trade finance. Another area of focus we do support in our corporate and financial institutions, enabling sustainable trade flows around the world. I would say this is probably sort of in a nutshell what the main focal areas are at the moment.
Thank you so much, Michael, for a very clear and distinct introduction. Can I now move to Kashi? Kashi, may I request you to give us a little background on ICICI Bank and the segments you are focusing on?
Yeah, thanks, Puneet, and it's indeed a pleasure, part of this, August conclave that you're organizing. ICICI Bank is, as all of you would know, it's a universal bank in India, and we span across every sector of the financial services, right from the retail side of the bank to the mid-market, corporates, SME, and the entire government, financial institutions, and the works. And we are present in about 17 countries by way of either a rep office, branch office, or a wholly owned subsidiary, and so on and so forth. A good, decent, one of the banks with the highest international footprints. The other, we also have, in the form of subsidiary companies which deal into securities, mutual fund, both general and life insurance, and we are amongst the market leaders in our space. Specific to the area of corporate banking and transaction banking, I think the key focus area has been around digitization and try and see how to create value for both the clients and the bank by reducing the friction in various interaction points that happens between the bank and its various customers. Alongside, we've also seen that merely offering banking solutions to the customer is not good enough today, and rightly pointed out by Michael. We're talking about deeply embedding ourselves into the life cycle or journey cycle of the customer. So where we are coming from essentially is that, see, banking is a tertiary business. By that, what we mean is that nobody says that, hey, look, let's gather together and do banking today. I mean, it's not like, okay, let's go to a picnic holiday or buy a TV. Right? That's not the way it happens. Whether it's for an individual or even for a corporate, the end goal of using banking is always a fulfillment of a different personal business goal, and banking is only a conduit to serve that goal. And therefore, philosophically, we believe that being a part of that journey in a very seamless and non-intrusive manner is exactly where we are focusing, if I may say, as a very broad area of where we're thinking about the next leap in innovation.
Indeed, and I think very well said. It's the primary journeys of the corporations as well as end consumers that matter, and how do we make it seamless and pretty much become invisible in them.
Yeah.
Very nice, Kashi. Thank you. Zaid, may I request your inputs now?
We are a universal bank, so we provide, product services to retail customers, high net worth individuals, corporates, SMEs, government and government-related entities. We're not as big as the banks of our colleagues on the call in terms of size, but we like to think of ourselves as an innovative bank, and we've sure been on a journey of transformation over the past 4 years. 4 years ago, there was a material change at the helm of the bank, and a material change in the strategic orientations of the bank, which is majority owned by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the Kingdom of Bahrain, to modernize, to improve product and service offering, and at the heart of all of this is digitization. And this has been a journey on which we've embarked, again, 3-4 years ago. It's a long journey. It is a journey where things happen on iteration. It's not, something where things, happen very quickly. It takes a lot of, experience. You learn from the previous thing you've done. On the transaction banking space, obviously, when you say transaction banking, I think, it's redundant to say digital, because increasingly it seems like the only way and the only conduit through which these products and services are offered. So we're pushing there to kind of bring the bank to international standards. Apart from our presence in Bahrain, obviously our home country, we're also present in the UAE and Saudi Arabia with full licenses, and we're looking at expanding in the region and beyond. So there are, sort of like regional, perhaps not global at this point in time, but regional ambitions that we're working on as well. And the combination of these two, digitization and expansion, is also something which is very interesting, provides a lot of opportunities and a lot of synergies, where you are kind of, we're trying constantly to improve product and service, but we're also trying to take advantage from what's already on the table in other countries from other entities. We've been recently through an acquisition, after which we integrated the Bahrain Islamic Bank, which is now part of the NBB group. And that as well is something in which we are, digitization is pretty much on top of the agenda, and kind of integration and synergies between the solutions is something which is at the forefront of what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Thanks, Zaid, and all the best for your both digital transformation as well as the international expansions which you are undertaking.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michael, coming back to you, I think in the last three responses, clearly the common piece was digital is the core of the strategy and evolution from an innovation perspective. Could you tell us about the ongoing digital transformation journey at Standard Chartered, particularly insights you can share on the challenges which you've overcome and the lessons learned along the way? That could be very valuable for the audience who have joined us today and is on a very similar digital transformation journey.
Absolutely happy to. Before I come to Standard Chartered specifically, I would say innovation, some say innovation is born from necessity. And I think, what you actually mentioned at the beginning, Puneet, from what COVID has, or what the pandemic has actually instilled to the industry and to the world, I think last year has been a good example of this. We have seen lots of digital transformations, both within the bank and with our clients, to accelerate massively, to your earlier point. And now, as the world begins to chart its recovery, right? I mean, we see many of our clients continuing with their digital pivot. So for us, it's no different, right? We remain very focused on digitizing the way our clients manage their cash flows, trade, supply chain financing, payments, right? Where we're looking to much more digitally engage with our clients, whether this is through access channels, whether this is through digital service channels. And we have, the way to get there is we've shifted our teams to focus on the client journey itself, right? So think much more from a client's perspective, to put the delivery of solutions to clients in the center of all we do. We focus on agile development rather than the more traditional, waterfall and siloed focus. And we're seeing, it pay off, right? Whether this is with the rollout of our next generation electronic banking tools or digital channels for the delivery of trade documents, etc. Right? And this new way of working, as we call it, has a lot of attention and support within the group. But I would say, one of the bigger lessons learned is that digital transformation is not just about the technology, but or perhaps even more importantly, about the people and culture. Right? It's an area that we're actively driving and supporting. Often it is the change of mindset that enables acceleration in innovation and development. And we all know that, change is not necessarily something that everybody welcomes. And if you want to do a digital transformation, you need to take your colleagues along, right? And they need to really want the change. Once it gets working and it gets into the flow, it gets widely accepted. It is really fascinating to see how people get excited about it. It's a little bit like, how we saw how quickly the world got used to and adapted to the fact that most of us work from home, not today and not all the time, but I mean, I do work quite a bit from home. So it is I would say the journey is not a technological journey alone. It is quite a journey with your colleagues, and you need to take them along. That was one of the main learnings I think we had.
Well said, Michael. As Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think you have underlined that the fact that digital transformation can only happen when there is a appropriate culture transformation with new ways of working. Very nice. Yeah. Thank you. Kashi, I'll come back to you, and the question I would have for you is, ICICI has been seen as a innovation pioneer since its inception. In fact, it is one of the bank who really grew rapidly across all segments since the time it started, and is seen as a leader in many innovations across the segments you talked about you serve. Could you give us examples of some of the significant innovations the bank has introduced in the last 3 years in the area of small and medium-sized business as well as large corporate segments it's serving?
Yeah, yeah. So thanks, for this, Puneet, for this question. It's a very interesting question because you know, exactly the way Michael spoke about. Digital transformation or innovation again is if you talk about innovation like a product, it's very simply defined. But in the banking space, there has got to be a product innovation, and then that product innovation gets delivered through its internal people, and then that gets adopted by the customers, and then all put together is when you would say that the innovation actually worked and is driving value to its stakeholders in its own singularity. Innovation as a concept doesn't really cut ice with with the bank or with the customers as such. Having said that, I think if I look at the primary way the banks have been interacting with customers, and these are still primary, I must say, although the ratios are changing. uh, there is this whole bank entity, what we can call as the assisted service bank, which is predominantly the branch based banking, where there's a physicality to it, there's a distribution side. Clients come interact the branch premises with their trade documents, payments, and whatever request that has to be done. The second is primarily the self-service side of the bank, which is today I must say it's the largest side of the bank on the corporate side or the SME side, where the clients come to an interface of the bank, namely a corporate internet banking or a mobile banking or whatever else that one might have to interact. And the third layer, if I may say, and increasingly that's the thrust area that we're seeing around the world, is the world of invisible banking, where you are where customer is operating in their environment, the bank is operating in its environment, but somewhere there is an interconnect between the two, and you are embedded into the journey of the customer. So in if you see in the bank, innovations have happened in all these three buckets, because it's not an either or, that that suddenly with a magic wand you find that every customer who has been used to visiting the branch stops visiting and starts using a online CIB or an RIB, because of the first thing that I told you, that there is an adaptive issue to it. Like it's not just you provide a technology, people are just waiting for it and start banking, because there are so many things in a corporate, in a SME, they have to fall in place before the adoptions begin. So we've made our strides. Say if you look at it today in the way our branches are structured, a lot of paper-based requests and interactions have completely been digitized, although the visit is physical. So we have kiosk, we have tablets. Just to give you an example, some of the innovation, very basic innovation, I must say, is that there are a lot of businesses that want to deposit cash. Although that's banks don't want to popularize it, and the country is driving towards digitization, yet there is cash in the economy and people want to bank their cash. So simple innovation like we've made certain apps where the details about the cash, etc., could be pre-filled by the customer, and a token number gets generated there and then. And when the person goes to the teller, all that the teller needs to retrieve is just that token number, and everything else is kind of set up, and then you count the cash and then you go. So this is a very simple innovation, and obviously on the back of it, you can tie this up information, post it to the ledger of the company to, hey, look, I've received so and so cash from so and so agent. A very simple kind of an innovation, which I can say has made an impact to many customers who are, say, dealing with cash and so on. Like that, there are many innovation on the on the self-service channel basis. So I think we've been leading quite a lot of innovation. Within that segment, if I say the small and medium business enterprises, typically sole proprietorship or small companies with lower paid up capital, there our innovation has been on changing the format from the internet banking to the mobile platform. So we have this platform called InstaBiz, which today is a multitude of service, clubbed into one. Almost 140 services are available there, and a lot of services which either you were visiting the branch or you were actually wanting to log in is something that we have enabled here, and the popularity has been and the usage traction has been humongous. I must say, adoption has been great. So that's a format change that one key innovation I could talk about. Even corporates, the large corporates with multiple signatories, etc., have begun to adopt, but obviously in a large corporate the workflows are complex and does not lend itself to that easy kind of a migration to a mobile journey. So that's an effort that is still on. On the invisible side of banking is where made quite a lot of stride out there with respect to driving our partnership strategies with multiple service providers, uh, where we have through our API journeys, we have kind of integrated with the either ERP service providers or directly with the customers, and given them a seamless journey so that they can bank from the comfort of their own respective ERPs and so on and so forth. So multiple such efforts are underway, which have been giving value to both the customer and the bank. So these, I hope I have covered it. The breadth of the innovation that is happening across the various touch point interface. There are more things that are happening, but I must say that they will build upon from where the invisible banking is living itself. But all I must say is that specifically in the corporate world, this is day one for digital. There's a long way to go. Both from the bank side as well as from the client adoption side.
Thank you
Over to you,
so much,
Puneet.
Kashi, for setting the full spectrum of innovation for us. And I love your articulation of invisible banking. I think I used to call it API banking up until now. I'm going to use invisible banking a lot more. Uh, Excellent. Moving on to Zaid. Zaid, as I understand, the economy of Bahrain is heavily dependent on oil and gas. And over the years, we have seen a very concerted effort on global energy transition, which is affecting the oil industry. And obviously, with pandemic also impacted the demand last year quite significantly. How are you and your bank is navigating the challenges which this kind of disruption has? And how do you see the demand for structured finance and transaction banking services evolving for Bahrain as well as the broader Middle East now that you're going and serving other countries as well?
Thank you, Puneet. That's a very good question. Yes, I mean, the economy of Bahrain, as with most economies in the Gulf region, is relying a lot on hydrocarbon and oil and gas. This reliance, I mean, I'll address this point before we go, to address the rest of the question, is something that Bahrain as a country is aware of and has been trying to, with success, I have to say, to diversify economy, to look at other sources, and to an extent, this is working on financial services, fintech over the past few years, hospitality, logistics. These things, sectors are contributing increasingly into the Bahrain economy to reduce that reliance on hydrocarbons. In terms of the demand for product and service, I mean, first I would like to say that COVID-19 has been a real life test. I mean, we're talking about digital, and we're always testing solutions, etc., checking the readiness and whether our solutions and systems are sufficient or are adequate. COVID-19 was basically a surprise test, not a scheduled test. This is the kind of test you come to the classroom and the teacher says, okay, surprise exam. So everyone had to basically adapt there was confinement, there was social distancing. People had to do transactions from where they were sitting, and oftentimes where they were sitting was home rather than an office. So it kind of put a fair level of pressure on the solutions, the systems. It tested the digitality, if I can call it this way, of certain solutions and certain things and products we're offering our clients. And it was an excellent learning opportunity because we had to find solutions fairly quickly to problems. Whatever wasn't functioning in an optimal way came at the forefront and was immediately visible. So had to be addressed. For transaction banking, demand was reduced on the trade side for a while, and then but has multiplied, in cash management. So people still had to make payments. Companies had still to pay salaries and suppliers and whatnot. Trade flows have slightly reduced, and I think that's the case, has been the case everywhere. Demand in general, except for certain products has dropped. The year 2020 will be remembered for that, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, from a purely professional perspective, that is. The other relevant element is all the actions and measures that the regulators and governments have taken across the globe, and from where I'm sitting across the GCC, where there were actions to relieve SMEs and corporates, through debt rescheduling, through moratorium on payments, etc. And all of that has put further pressure on the solutions and what needed to be done on the merchant acquiring side, which is also part of my remit here at NBB. There was a lot that needed to be done very quickly. Perhaps few things that the bank was saying, yeah, I will do this, but kind of was number 4 or 5 in the priority list. All of a sudden came at the forefront that tokenization, all these non-contact type of payments again came rushing at the forefront, and we are happy to say that we managed to find solutions for these questions and problems, and overall it was in terms of digitization and in terms of understanding what the clients want. Strangely enough, COVID-19 was I'll never dare say positive, but something that gave us the opportunity to kind of learn a lot about where we stand and what we need to do.
Very well said, Zaid. And the way you articulated about this COVID being the surprise test and tested our resilience and ability to actually take on the challenges and deliver on services required by our clients, and as well as the programs which government mandated, deserve a round of applause for all the bankers on the call today, as well as those who are joining us at this event. I think for a very long time, banking industry's customer trust was eroding, and I tend to believe what banks globally have done in the last 1 year in order to support individuals, families, businesses with moratorium, with government aids, with other cash management tools which allowed them to run their business remotely, deserve a round of applause. Thank you for making the banking industry look good in the times, very testing times last year. Michael, I'm going to bank on the depth of experience which you bring to this discussion on transaction banking. You have been a transaction banking executive for over 30 years with a very truly global experience. And I'm sure in your career, you have seen several evolutions in the business. And I would love to learn from you, how would you contrast the current digital disruption the industry is experiencing with previous major shifts, and what lessons from those evolutions one can apply to accelerate transformation and staying relevant in digital disruption today?
Yeah, so I mean, digital transformation is obviously not a new concept, right? If you look back, let's say 10 years or so post a global financial crisis, we saw a focus shift towards digital, creating visibility, obtaining control, right? Which meant that treasurers looked to automate what they could see and elevate visibility within their business, right? Treasury management systems, etc. If we go another 10 years back, we saw a lot of sort of at the turn of the century, actually, or the millennium in that case, right? We saw a lot of developments around industry platforms in the banking world. We saw a lot of focus on the rollout of e-billing, payment mechanism to support industry platforms. And of course, we had the whole preparation for Y2K. So somewhere in between these two, we saw the evolution of a new ecosystem. I think the colleagues were talking partly about this, where the rise of and you did certainly at the beginning, the rise of the collaboration between banks and fintechs, right, which led to the next phase of digital transformation coming into play. So fast forward, right, this has given another notch along with the pandemic. I think what is different is clearly the pace, right? The speed that things are changing and evolving clearly feels different, right? The rate of innovation is ever increasing, right? Development times get shorter. We see many more entrants into the markets. Or perhaps they're just more visible to us because we didn't see all of the different markets in the past, right? And a lot of it is technology enabled, and that, in my mind, is not only the technology used or applied for the development of new solutions or platforms, that systems. It's also the technology that allows the speed with which information becomes globally available. So, how collaboration has become even, less dependent on location due to communication technologies. Just look at our panel today, right? I mean, again, location, we have, most people these days live either on planet Zoom or planet, or any of the other planets. What I found an interesting, more recent development, or actually also an evolution, is in education, right? Education has become more innovative, and I think that will spark further innovation going forward. So of course, we've always had e-learning, and we've had, courses, online courses, but now we have developments like a school in France, École 42, which is a coding school that is globally expanding, where the focus is on peer-to-peer learning. There's no, it's entirely computer-based. There's no teachers, there's no professors, there's no admission that follows diploma requirements. It is actually admission that follows collaboration and an assessment center. And I think that will further broaden the community. So I would, however, go sort of back to my original point that digital innovation. So I think the speed is completely different, right? We need to adjust much quicker. We need to live with much more information. We need to sieve through much more information. That is actually a bit of a challenge for us. Quite often, we talked about this, that the sort of transformation is sometimes at the beginning. Corporates like to have curated solutions, right? So some do choose their own fintechs, but if it's a startup, right, or a relatively young fintech, they like a curated solution. So banks are actually ideally positioned at times because, banks are still, are there to safeguard, right, many matters and a trusted quantum in the industry. So that is, there's a real role to be played for us. And as I said, I would go back. Digital innovation is not all about the technology. It is really about how we collaborate and how we incorporate the cultural change in the collaboration going forward.
Thank you so much, Michael, and we totally agree with the observation you have made, and underlining all of this is clearly the new ways of working. So with that, Kashi, we talked about several innovation, and one of the innovation I very clearly recall, because we participated with you in that, is ICICI was also one of the first banks many years ago now to try with blockchain-based trade processing services. And how has been your experience so far on that journey? And I particularly ask this because I think you always get a mixed feedback in the industry on whether blockchain is proving to be true to its potential. So we would love to learn how has been your experience, and particularly our audience would like to take cues from your learning, so that when as they are piloting blockchain based solutions, they can accelerate their journeys.
Yeah, Puneet. Thanks for that question. So yes, you're right. We were amongst the first, or perhaps the first Indian bank to kind of pilot on the blockchain on the trade, side. And since then, there has been a lot of learning iterations to understand what works, what doesn't work, and so on and so forth. It's a continuous journey. But the reactions, you have to understand that, and the reactions has to be taken from a 360-degree perspective from the participants, who will make this whole thing successful, right? So one is the bank itself. Second is the other banks who are not the sponsor bank of the blockchain. That's the the first constituent of the ecosystem. And then you have the end customers, and then you have the the regulators, and so on and so forth. So I think as we speak, say 4 or 5 years, there is a maturity cycle to it, and new thoughts are emerging and evolving with respect to how might one constitute this whole ecosystem for real transactions to start taking shape. Having said that, the response from some of the peer banks has been excellent. They're welcoming this move, and there are moves on making consortiums and stuff like that. So those are certain initiatives which are taking shape. Then there are on the customer side, some of the large customers that we have, or even the smaller customers that we have. So in our pilots, where between the vendor and the supplier, or the corporate and the dealer, and so on and so forth. So within that ecosystem, how might we function with a blockchain installed and going out of their say central systems, and banking on this system. So experiences have been positive, but isolated. I must say, it's really the scaling up will happen only if once the ecosystem play starts happening and the network effort really start to take shape. I think our story is, or the right kind of story is to stay invested here, keep innovating on the fringes, and there are multiple use cases that are getting pioneered, specifically in a country like India, where especially in the area of trade finance, you need a lot of other digital elements, other elements like the shipping bill, the customs, and which are not part of the core banking set to also digitize, right? Then once, and this enabling ecosystem is getting progressively digitized in India. So the GST has gotten a lot of digitization into the whole trade commerce, if I may say. Accompanied to that is the e-way bill which has come in, or even the the e-invoicing. So these are all ecosystem based digitization which is developing over the last, say, I must say 3 to 4 years, which is making use cases for blockchain more conducive to flourish. So you now can extend yourself to invoicing through a very trusted source, which is the GSTN data. Then shipping companies have, most of the global shipping companies have digitized their part of whatever shipping bill, and so on and so forth. The customs in India is also trying to kind of digitize their whole transaction processing. So there is a lot of value creation that is going to happen once all these multiple stakeholders based systems are getting digitized, and then you kind of, as Michael put it, collaborate and get them onto the blockchain, and then you will start suddenly seeing the whole blockchain ecosystem play. And I would say that a tipping point will come very soon, where not being part of the ecosystem is more painful than being in, and therefore that will kind of get more and more participant to join the blockchain, more banks to kind of join the consortium and stuff like that. The regulator is also trying its piece to kind of usher in a favorable environment. I'm sure we will see blockchain as a mainstream technology. In what form exactly it scales up is something that is remaining to be seen, but that blockchain is going to power a lot of trade and commerce, whether it is transaction banking or lending use cases, etc. Now that, I think it's a matter of time and maturity of the various component of the ecosystems to get digitized. It will fly after that.
Thank you so much, Kashi, for a very optimistic tone. Coming from a technology provider, I think it's good to hear that we have a lot to do to develop new use cases, but you are optimistic that we will be able to scale many of them. Zaid, during this discussion, as well as some of the other discussions we have had in the conference so far, I think it's well established that the COVID-19 accelerated the digital adoption across every segment of the business. Now, the real question we have at hand is, would we be able to sustain the level of adoption once the physical restriction post-pandemic are taken off? And what should bank be doing now to ensure that this adoption rates continues to persist post-pandemic?
Thanks, Puneet. Look, Kashi spoke about something interesting, and I like the tipping point he mentioned when talking about blockchain adoption. It gets to a point where it's more painful for you not to be in the system than to do whatever it takes to be in the system. So, I think for digitization in general, this also applies. On post-pandemic, hopefully very soon, I think there will be some slowdown. At least the acceleration would reduce. It will plateau to an extent, and this is my estimation, because I think people in general will be more keen to kind of just the fact that going out and seeing other people is going to be okay for a while before the normal trend of trying to digitize and do things remotely, etc., picks up again. So from that front, but there could be some slowdown. The thing is that I don't think we should look at digitization in banking in isolation from the rest. Governments are digitizing. E-government services are increasing in coverage of the required services and in terms of number of things you can do on them and functionalities. It's happening everywhere in all segments. Kashi spoke about the customs, even traffic police, civil, all the documents that's required from municipalities, things like that. It's happening everywhere. So this is not something that's just unique to banks. Everybody is moving into that trend. I think focus on what's important, or to, as far as my experience is concerned, to focus on reliability and stability of solutions, a client experience, making sure our systems are as user-friendly and as practical as possible, striving to invisible banking. I'll adopt that term, Kashi, with your permission as well. But it's just an accelerator that kind of got some people who were perhaps a bit more reluctant or a bit more dubitative about digital to adopt by necessity. And it's like when you try something you never tried before, and when you actually find it good, then it's human nature for you to kind of be a bit more open about it or completely adopt it. So I think what we need to do now is maintain the level of effort, focus on what's important for clients, and focus on getting it right all the time. This is perhaps one of the most important lessons of 2020 for me. It needs to work all the time. It needs to be practical. It needs to be as transparent as possible. And I think building on this type of foundation will get to a point where pretty confident in that, where adoption rates are gonna keep increasing and keep moving to a self-service and seamless service offering.
Gentlemen, I'm going to go back and ask a very common question, and I would like us to look forward into 2021. And from here on, what do you believe are the emerging trends for our business and corporate banking segments for this year? And perhaps if you can give a little bit more longer term, that'll also be helpful. And from that perspective, the way you see the industry evolving, what do you think should be the innovation focus area for banks in near and medium term? And Michael, once again, we would request you to give your perspectives first.
So let me start with, let's say, continuing trends first, and then come perhaps to emerging trends. So continuing, I see along the subject of supply chain management, whether this is on the financing side or the broader management side. Clearly, alongside with the supply chain comes the sustainability element, where we're going to see more application of technology from my perspective. We see more requirements for transparency in that space, because we do, people want to know what the broader ecosystem there is to ensure operational agility. I think broadly speaking, we see a reinvigorated focus on working capital. We have seen that with the pandemic, that companies that used to do dynamic discounting started using third-party financing to finance the supply chain. Clearly, there's a further shift to e-commerce, right? There's an evolution of new payment methods. And then I would say sort of emerging is something that central banks have been looking into, as well as digital currencies, right? Or stable coins at least, but there was a ruling not too long ago in the US. There's lots of developments all across Asia Pacific. Other areas, other geographies are a bit behind at times, but I think that while this does not really have something direct to do with the corporate banking, given that B2B is moving and continues moving to B2B2C, and many companies now start actually with direct sales, that may very well become relevant for companies. And I think there's pretty much of a role to be had in the banking industry. So that I would say from the continuation to the potentially new ones. And from a people's perspective, clearly, flexible work environments and how you support this with technology, it will continue to also be very critically important for all of us.
Thank you so much, Michael. Those are very helpful inputs. Kashi, maybe request your views now.
Yeah, Puneet. So thanks, Michael. I think you kind of spread the the layout pretty well. I would like to just build upon that. I think they're pretty much a good summary. I would tend to think over and above what Michael said is in the area of data and analytics. The corporate side of the bank typically has been a slow adopter to data analytics. So most of the work the financial services space that has happened is on the retail side of the bank, where individual customer behavior and so on and so forth has been dissected, and there are multiple use cases that have flourished. I would tend to think that the whole, the kind of data that is available in a corporate, and with the ecosystem digitization I just mentioned about in the previous thing about the government also digitizing, the kind of data footprints that a transaction is leaving, like Michael talked about the supply chain, the visibility of vendor, and so on and so forth. I think that makes the whole ecosystem very, very data rich, and that lends itself to a huge, analytics pedestal, and therefore a new class of use cases will start to emerge, which will which I think will be autonomous in some nature. You can have a lot of artificial intelligence or whatever you say, machine learning kind of use cases coming up in the realm of corporate banking, all with a view to optimize working capital cycles or generate more value for the bank or reduce risk or whatever is a use case. So that definitely I would tend to think will be a highlighted area of priority, innovations around data technologies and adoption of use cases in the B2B world. Alongside that, I would also like to see that not only the bank's life and ecosystem has changed with respect to the way of working and so on and so forth, but so have the customer's life. A lot of customers, sans manufacturing or such like entities which need physicality, even their lives have changed very significantly. So whether it is working from home of their employees or working from home of the bank's employee. So I would tend to think as banks, we need to innovate further in this area as to in the new milieu where both the bank employees and the employees of the relevant employees of the corporate, they're also working from home. What does it mean for for enabling such for such transactions, and how does the whole relationship management happen in such a scenario? Because if you see traditionally, in the corporate side, SME side, the relationship management is driven in a very physical world, like go meet, greet, and have a cup of tea, coffee, or whatever. So that is something that is, if you see over the last 10 months, has been completely on zoomed out, if I may say. And so I guess how does one build relationship in a zoomed out world? How does the how does that translate into new way of interacting with the client base? Because end of the day, technology can do that in terms of bringing in efficiency and automation and so on and so forth. But I guess the human element of touch and feel will still be there. Form factors might change. Now that's an area where some kind of a social innovation which has happened in the personal world, like if I say like Facebook, for example. So I guess there is an opportunity for some kind of business networking. Not like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is very, very transaction oriented. Something like that could be an area of innovation which helps in building relationship, banks to the customer and so on and so forth. So I guess these could be the potential areas where there could be a lot of innovation. And yes, the last one I would tend to stick out my neck on is again is the whole invisible banking space, as I put it, because corporates are also looking at ecosystem based solutions because they have their vendors, suppliers, dealers, and stuff like that, and they're looking at deep partnerships with bank in terms of providing an end-to-end solution and not a point solution that satisfies a particular product or a process need. So that's where I would tend to think that a whole lot of innovation will happen in the areas of API banking. And that would also require a lot of development at the corporate end, because for APIs, it's not a one-way street. So like, I mean, I might have APIs, but the corporate on the other side should be able to receive the APIs and give their APIs, or maybe create that whatever exchange is required for the transactions to happen. So I guess these are the three broad areas I would tend to think there will be a lot of focus in making business happen.
Thank you, Kashi, for those three additions. Very valuable. Zaid, could we have your thoughts now?
Yeah, sure, Clint. Look, I mean, globally, I think there are few, big factors that will be impacting the way forward for corporate banking. The aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis, remote working, some level of social distancing, reduced mobility, etc., will dictate, at least for a couple of years, in my view, a new reality in terms of how things are done, how meetings are done, like our meeting today. Will define how people work, etc. I think globally there'll be a resumption of large projects, things that have been put on hold during the COVID-19. It's very simple. Construction sites are empty. Projects have been moving quite slowly, etc. And after this, the wide, the more kind of restrictive side of this pandemic is behind us. Companies and sponsors of projects would want to accelerate to catch up on whatever time has been lost. There will be, an increased trade flow globally, commodities in particular. So in parallel, I also think there'll be an increase, a resurgence in M&A, because this crisis will leave some companies a bit more fragile and a bit more exposed to M&A risk and take over. So that's something that will also dictate some of the trends. Companies, corporates will be looking for more stable and more sustainable funding, and this is something you observe after each crisis. I mean, the wisest of them would have perhaps realized that they have the wrong kind of leverage, that they have too much leverage, etc., and will tend to correct that. And last element is perhaps the ESG, environment, social, and global, and governance, which would also dictate some changes in the way companies do business and the way they exchange with banks. So overall, I think the impact of this would be, again, better understanding of banks of all of these requirements, better solutions in terms of providing, companies with optimal solutions for funding. Funding is extremely important in my view, and understanding all the cascade of client, and understand how best to tackle things, and particularly when it comes to inventory management, to get cover the trade requirements, perhaps beyond the classic and traditional tools. There will be a continuation of digitization effort, adoption effort, make it easy on clients to adopt these solutions.
Thank you, Zed, and thank you, Kashi and Michael, for giving us a lot of food for thought. Clearly, there is a lot to be done in 2021 and beyond. With this, we come to end of a very stimulating and insightful discussion. I would like to take this opportunity to extend a big thank you to all our panelists. We're very grateful for your time and the valuable insights that you have been able to share in this panel. I would also like to thank all the attendees for making time to attend this session, as well as Finacle Conclave. I do hope the session was useful and you can take a lot of what we discussed back to your organization and implement along with your teams. You can always come back and view the recording. Our teams will be sharing the link of the session as well as the other recordings which will be available on the portal. Feel free to share the same with your colleagues as well. And I hope you will stay tuned to Finacle Conclave and enjoy the rest of the high quality speaker discussions we have lined up for you. Goodbye and stay safe. Back to you, Lakshmi.